Skills 1 through 4. Page 185. Questions 1 through 8. Listen to part of a lecture in a zoology class.
Okay, calm down, please. It's time to get started. Okay, our topic for today is hibernation. When it begins getting cold in the north as winter approaches, different types of animals deal with the approach of the cold weather in different ways. Some animals move south to warmer weather, and some animals increase their activity or grow thicker fur to stay warm. However, other animals begin to consume more food in the fall to carry them through a period of hibernation during the cold weather. So, today, we'll be discussing this third category of animals, the animals that hibernate. Now, these are the animals like groundhogs and bears that go into a state of unconsciousness or semi-consciousness during the cold winter months. Dave, you have a question.
When I went to a cabin in the mountains last winter, we had to be careful of bears. I was under the impression that the bears would be hibernating, but is that just an old tale some people believe?
That's an interesting question, and I'll actually get to that in a moment, but let's start with a smaller animal. The first animal we'll look at is the groundhog. Now, the groundhog's one of the best-known hibernators. It goes into its burrow 4 or 5 feet underground sometime in the fall, and it doesn't come out until spring. You won't see hide nor hair of them all winter. Now, because the groundhog hibernates so completely, it's the groundhog that has achieved prominence in our folklore as the animal that's responsible for determining whether or not winter's over and it's safe to come out of hibernation. You see, according to legend, the groundhog will come out of the burrow where it's hibernating on Groundhog Day in February. Now, if winter's over, the groundhog will remain out of its burrow. But if winter's going to last for a while longer, the groundhog will scurry back into its burrow. Yes, Amanda, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Does the groundhog have a good record? About predicting whether winter's over?
It's just a folktale, and I think you won't be surprised that the groundhog isn't batting much more than 50-50. Okay, back to the discussion of hibernation with a little more emphasis on its scientific nature. Yes, Tom, what's your question?
Well, Professor, I'm not exactly sure what hibernation is. I mean, how is hibernation different from sleep?
That's a good question, Tom. One that I'm a little late in clarifying. Here's the deal. Hibernation is different from sleep, and these differences are seen in body temperature and heart rate. You see, both decrease significantly during hibernation, in contrast to regular sleep. But then, when an animal comes out of hibernation, the heart rate and body temperature increase to the levels normal during waking hours. So, as I said, before an animal goes into hibernation, whether complete or not, it usually tries to eat enough to store up body fat. But it's far from settled as to whether animals hibernate as an adaptation to cold or as a reaction to a scarcity of food. Lowering body temperature and not moving is a way of saving energy that can't be easily replenished during winter months. Now, in my opinion, it would seem easier to resist cold, per se, than survive a lack of food. Food needed to generate energy and warmth. Okay, now let's get back to the different ways animals hibernate. We've discussed the groundhog, which hibernates throughout the cold weather. Other animals that hibernate in a similar fashion are bats. Bats will revive if they're startled in their hibernating place, though. So their hibernation is not quite as complete as a groundhog. Tree squirrels also do not hibernate fully, although they do remain mostly inactive throughout the winter. If there's a warm spell, they might come out and search for food, as anyone who lives in the suburbs knows. I remember one mildly warm day during winter break watching the squirrels dig through what was left of the garden in my backyard. Okay, approaching the end of our continuum, we'll now look at the bear, which hibernates in a different manner. And this ought to answer your question, Dave. You see, bears don't hibernate as completely as groundhogs or bats. In the southern half of the United States, bears don't hibernate at all because the weather doesn't get cold enough for them to hibernate. In the northern half of the United States, bears may not stay in hibernation for the entire winter. They may come out of their hibernation during the winter and wander about before returning to hibernation. Now, obviously, for a large animal like a bear, it takes a longer time to warm up after emerging from hibernation. So, during the period when a bear is coming out of hibernation, the animal's entire body does not warm at once. The area around the heart warms up first. As the heart warms up, it begins beating at its normal rate, and it's then able to pump blood around the rest of the body to heat it up. These are the main points that we need to cover about hibernation. Now, let's move on to the next subject if there aren't any more questions.